You're listening to Let's Talk Creation, the science podcast that's just for you.
We're supposed to talk about creation. I suppose we should do that. Oh, I got one that's really creation. Important. I saw the Dominion, the Jurassic World Dominion trailer, and there is a very controversial bit in this trailer. There's a very clear shot of what appears to be a heavily feathered dinosaur. Is this true? Do dinosaurs have feathers? Are we going to get in trouble by addressing this topic? Probably. Do I care? Not really.
So let's just go for ratings. It's good for downloads.
It's good for ratings, yeah. Good. Controversy.
Todd, you're crazy.
Tell me about dinosaur feathers. Why, when I saw the original Jurassic Park, no feathers anywhere?
Well, yeah. So up until this point, we really haven't, and this has actually been one of the complaints that I've seen from some paleontologist friends, that why don't we have any feathered dinosaurs in the Jurassic Park movies? Largely because, 1993, and you have iconic dinosaurs being introduced. Jurassic Park 3 has some feathers on the Velociraptors, and that's about it until I think the Fallen Kingdom. The Indoraptor had some of the feathery looking follicle thingies going on again on its head. Other than that, I can't think of any others that off the top of my head had feathers up until Dominion. So they're really doubling down on it at that point, right?
Yeah. So yes,
and I think the it was a conscious decision, wasn't it, by Spielberg, to make all the dinosaurs kind of not look too feathery and to have basically grey or brown skin, because he thought that Technicolor dinosaurs wouldn't be scary enough. So I understand that was a deliberate decision.
That makes sense.
So did we know about dinosaur feathers in '93? Is that something that I remember this being more of a later development or did we suspect it?
In the 90s, there were fossils coming out of China that had feathers or feathery-like things on them, but they were all really small dinosaurs. You did have some raptors. I mean, you had Sinornithosaurus, which had feathery stuff on it. But it was still very much that kind of like, maybe Velociraptor had feathers on it, and if it did, maybe they're just these little tufts occasionally. Like there wasn't like a consensus that this thing was fully covered with feathers. But that's been like since then, more and more fossils keep coming out of China, and then even Canada and Germany and some other places where you've got clear feathers on things that we've traditionally called dinosaurs, for decades. So like members of the same family as Velociraptor, the Dromaeosaurids, you have Microraptor and Tianuraptor and a few other ones that are fully feathered with flight, what kind of look like flight feathers. They're not actually ones, but what we call pennaceous feathers. And so, yeah, putting them on a raptor dinosaur makes a lot of sense. If they had covered a Brachiosaurus in feathers, I mean, that doesn't really make any sense. Not only because we do not have fossils of that, but I mean, this animal is 60 to 80 tons. Like, it's going to overheat if you do something like that. So, yeah.
Brings us back to the X-Files and spontaneous dinosaurian combustion. It's just...
So are these real?
I
got to ask, on behalf of all the skeptics out there, are you sure that paleontologists aren't faking this and it's all just a scam to get us to believe that turkeys are T-Rexes?
Like a 6-foot turkey. Yeah.
Can you address that question? I think that's an important thing to talk about.
Well, I can say from my own experience, because having grown up in the 90s when dinosaurs didn't have feathers, the specimens that Matt's talking about started showing up in like 96, 98, 97. You started seeing these things that have a little bit of fuzz on them, or, at the end of the tail, there's a couple feathers sticking out, and people were like, what? And it's not until, you get something like Microraptor completely covered and shown, I think that was 2003 or 2004. So growing up and reading the creation literature in the 90s, everything was, there are no feathers on dinosaurs. And there's no evidence for it. And there's no good reason why there would be anything like that anyway, right? Because feathers are for flight, was the common type of argument. And nobody's going to argue that something like Velociraptor is trying to fly. It's obviously a ground-based running animal. So it was Microraptor that really changed my mind in 2003. Up till then, I was willing to at least grant, there's a lot of skeptical reasons to be unsure about the others. I was wrong, but that at the time I thought that it was fairly reasonable. And as soon as I saw Microraptor, then it was like, well, no, we have something that skeletally was already recognized as a dinosaur. It's definitely a raptor. It's covered in feathers. Ergo, raptors have feathers. And so I made the switch at that point. Most creationists, 20 years later, still are pretty skeptical, despite really, lots of evidence. And Matt's got a very big paper that was published in the 2018 ICC that goes through in great detail lots of the different organisms that were known to that point, and there's more that just keep showing up. So for us as creationist paleontologists, the three of us are here. We haven't seen any particular problem with having feathers on dinosaurs, and I think that Spielberg didn't want to put feathers on back in the 90s. Not only would it have looked really possibly weird, but there were a lot of paleontologists that weren't so sure about that at the time. And then it just became part of the Jurassic Park lore, right? That it's canonical. And in a sense, because the people are genetically creating these organisms, they made them without feathers. You can at least say that's the blueprint. And all of our paleontology friends are like, yeah, but they can change that now. And we're like, yeah, they should. And so we're finally in this last movie getting a chance to see Velociraptor the way that it's done on, say, a Discovery Channel special, only far more menacing and dangerous to human beings, which is good.
Somebody tell us though about Archaeoraptor, because I know some of our listeners are gonna think about this. So, Archaeoraptor was this thing that was publicized by National Geographic, right, in 1999.
Yeah.
And it basically turned out to be a fake.
Yes.
Basically, parts of different fossils sort of pasted together. So somebody just tell us the story of Archaeoraptor.
So, Steven Zerkis was the guy who got hold of it, and he was all excited about it, because it's a cool looking fossil. And he called on, I think it was Phil Curry, to help him out. And, Phil's telling him, slow down, like, let's go through peer review, we'll publish it that way and everything. And Zerkis just calls National Geographic, and so totally circumvents that. And the National Geographic's thrilled about this. They run the thing cover issue. I want to say it's 98, maybe it was 99. And they they put it out there, and sure enough, it's a fake fossil. And this is a problem you get not just in China, but it happens in Brazil and Germany, anywhere you've got really nice preservation. Where that if the fossil looks really spectacular, you can get more money for it, right? So what they'll do is, hey, I found a broken piece of this fossil, broken piece of this one, boom, stitch them together, and put something over it so you can't see, and that's going to sell for a lot of money. So what people tend to think is because Archaeoraptor is fake, therefore all of them can be fake. And it's like, okay, well, couple of things to keep in mind here. Number one, it wasn't creationists that caught Archaeoraptor as a fake, right? It was regular evolutionary scientists. They were checking things themselves. They want to not put out things that are fake, right? And they've got their various reasons for doing that, but they want to be truthful in their science, what they think. The second one is, we have means to detect these things. So, when you put these fossils under typically like ultraviolet light and different things like that, you can see the cracks, you can see the plaster, it stands out. And so people have accused even like Archaeopteryx, which was found back in the 1860s and 70s. They've accused that of being fake. And, people have taken it, put it under those. They put it in X-ray synchrotrons, everything you can imagine. And no, it's real. Like, this is a real fossil. There's even original feather material still there, which is really cool, So we need to not automatically it's the same thing with hominins, right? I mean, Todd, you talk about this all the time, I'm sure, like with people coming up to you and Piltdown Man, Nebraska man. Like, I mean, no, just because there was one or two that were forgeries doesn't mean we should question the whole thing.
Yeah, Archaeoraptor, thinking of that, was even called the Piltdown bird, for a while. And then, to add to what Matt has said there, this, when we use the word fake here for the fossil, it wasn't a real singular fossil. It was a composite of 3 actual real things. Yep. So, it wasn't where somebody is sitting there etching feathers, onto the limestone or something like that. That's tedious, like really tedious. But rather, it was 3 actual fossils that then got, disentangled, one of which was Microraptor, as it turned out.
Yeah, right.
And I don't remember if that was the first fossil of Microraptor, or if it was just assigned to it, but it was recognized as, oh wait, this is this back half over here belongs to Microraptor, and it was actually made with real dinosaurs. It's kind of like my chocolate bar. It's made with real chocolate. It's made with real dinosaurs and other things, and this got teased apart. That was a terrible joke. Okay, that didn't work at all. But I promise volume, not quality. So it's like getting ramen noodles from Sam's Club. Right? It's a lot, but in the end, you're like, no. Yeah, I don't think that was good for me.
I want to clarify this, make sure our listeners got what you just said there. Archaeoraptor is a true, real feathered dinosaur, just not as Archaeoraptor. They took a piece of a real feathered dinosaur, stitched it together with some other things, glued it together, and that became the Archaeoraptor fake, which is totally different from Piltdown, where they literally took a jaw of a gorilla, or orangutan, and a skull of a human being and put them together to try to get us to think that these are ape men, when that was not what it was. You actually have, your situation is actually, there was a real feathered dinosaur in there. It was just put together with a bunch of other stuff that was not a feathered dinosaur, or not actually belonged together.
And the Microraptor piece didn't have feathers. Yep. Right. That part didn't have feathers. But now we have plenty of other Microraptor that do. So it turned out that Archaeoraptor, just teased it apart, and you still have a feathered dinosaur.
Whoops. So the people crying out that this is all fraud, and they're actually missing an important point there, that the fraud was actually made of feathered dinosaurs. All right. Well, that's irony.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because it seems like there's such a strong reaction against this idea. I remember watching Matt's talk at the International Conference on Creationism in 2018, and there was some lengthy discussion following that with some folks, and to say the least. And honestly, this is something I encounter with students on a regular basis. There are certain concepts that are they're ingrained, right? And it maybe is ingrained from 10 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and it just sort of sticks around. And it has staying power. You guys did an episode on the Canopy Theory, for example. That would be a good example of one that's has some staying power. And honestly, so much of it is just fascinating to me, because the degree to which we are unwilling to question our prior assumptions and prior beliefs is we tend to view it as defense, right? We fall into a similar defensive posture mentally as when we are attacked on something. And it's fascinating because ultimately we as Christians should be called to so much more than that. We should be called to truth and to intellectual humility, and we are called to those things. We need to get better at displaying them at times. And of course that can apply in a number of different areas, but to quote something that you guys said at your talk, we don't get to decide whether or not these things existed. That's not up to us. Instead, what we get to do is figure out, how do we make sense of them within a biblical worldview.
Yeah. And frankly, I find it sort of baffling, really, that this becomes such a sticking point, because there is nothing in the Bible that says that God only created birds with feathers. There's nothing that so much as hints at that. So, to make this a hill for creationists to die on seems to me such a strange thing to do. And I think it's only because of this notion that essentially birds are the modern descendants of dinosaurs that this question of feathered theropods becomes such a big issue for people. But I don't really understand it, because we're quite happy to think about bats being kind of flying mammals, and then you've got whales that are swimming mammals and all this kind of stuff. So so having feathered dinosaurs, feathered animals that cluster within the Dinosauria, to me doesn't seem such a big deal. I just find it very strange that people get so hung up about it.
And for that matter, the number of flightless birds that we have, that I would say most creationists would probably argue are unique created kinds. I don't know where the research is on all of them, but sure. I don't think that it's interesting. If you say, well, what about flightless birds that have feathers? And they'd say, well, they were birds and they descended and became land dwelling. Well, that's an evolutionary argument. Mm-hmm. Is that something that you're willing to concede in order to argue against feathered dinosaurs? Probably not.
I have my doubts that I think the land dwelling birds, the non-flying land dwelling birds, I don't see any evidence there that they were ever flying at all. So you have evidence of creatures that already have feathers and do not fly. But of course, they would say, look at the beak and look at the laying eggs and the making of the nest. They're clearly birds. They have it all except for the flying part.
Yep.
But yeah, like Paul, I don't understand quite what the fuss is about that one. That just seems to have become one of these hot button issues that you can hardly even bring up. And David, I was at Matt's talk at ICC as well. And I remember the heated discussion. People not quite yelling at him, but close to yelling at him.
Yeah, pretty much.
I think they even put you near like a break time with that talk, because it was we know we're going to spill over the time slot, so we're just going to put it right before lunch, and people can
that's exactly what happened. They're like, we can do questions as long as you want.
Yes,
just keep coming.
And I'm sitting in the audience going, no, we can't. Don't do that. Are you crazy?
Well, it was funny too, because the talk, like almost I think right before mine in a different room, was Ken Coulson changing the pre-flood boundary or pre-flood flood boundary, and I'm like,
that's more controversial.
Big deal. We should be arguing about that. I'm not, whether he's right or wrong, but like that's something that has huge implications across like multiple disciplines and fields in creationism. And here we are just saying, hey, there's some fossils that have feathers and they're things we call dinosaurs. It really has very little in terms of like big reaching perspective outside of a very narrow field, but that's the thing that we've latched onto as a thing. And I think it comes back to that, like, it's what we've done. Like, we've argued for so long that they don't have feathers, that, dinosaurs have nothing in common with birds. And I just think it's very hard to, like, just change your direction when you've been really focused on saying this thing and very, very convinced of it,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, when you've written a lot about it, or, as an organization, you kind of staked this as, this has been what we've always said. And the idea, I think, is unfortunately that if we give any credence, if we give any ground to, what the opposition has said, in this case, evolutionists, then we're not going to be able to stop them from being right about other things, right? If they're right about this, then they could be right about it all. And so they can't be right about this. Like, well, this actually doesn't entail all.
Yes.
But that seems to be the perspective for some on this. And, at least for those who are watching, here you've got, 5 creation scientist folks over here, and, 3 of us who got training in paleontology. We're all okay. We're all okay with dinosaurs having feathers, and don't think that this is in any way something, as Paul just said, anything that really seems to threaten creationism in any way. The Bible doesn't talk about it, and it talks about there being flying creatures. Like the word in Genesis 1 is not even bird. It's just flying stuff. So we've got plenty of room for letting God's world tell us what it is that He made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Matt, though, you put feathered dinosaurs in the title of your ICC paper. You know, what you should have expected attention.
What were you thinking?
You were asking for it.
Once
Ken's
again,
talking.
Chaos.
Boo.
The title though was Feathered Dinosaurs Reconsidered, so that left it kind of open. Maybe. See, that was even more trouble because then people came in, didn't read the abstract, and they're like, "Oh, he's gonna he's gonna demolish this."
Yeah.
Are we going to debunk this idea? Right. Exactly.
Yeah. That was a bad call.
But Ken's talk, although it deals with the pre-flood boundary, it's about stromatolites or microbial. Nobody makes blockbuster movies about stromatolites. Right? So, it's inevitable, Matt, that your talk was going to get
Might as well
more
just
attention.
stare at the painting the whole time. It's not like you need, moving film for this.
Yeah, well, it's funny that we're like going back to what Paul was saying about their, thinking of it in bigger categories. It part of that problem is that the only living things we have with feathers are birds, right? So it's like we connect that automatically with, birds have feathers, just like all our living reptiles except for leatherback sea turtles are cold-blooded, right? So like we automatically say, that, and so we try and carry that back into the past. But even just yesterday, a new article came out with in Nature that they got a beautiful fossil of a pterosaur, so not a dinosaur, and they're able to find melanosomes, so the things that help you tell what color a creature is, right, in the crest of the pterosaur, big soft tissue crest, this thing. Wow. And it has this fuzz that we've known pterosaurs have had for, we've known about it since the 60s and 70s. And people have constantly been like, are these feathers? Are they not feathers? And the new paper, you've got branching things with little plumes coming off. I mean, it looks like a feather, And so, okay, well, dinosaurs and pterosaurs are very close relatives of each other. So maybe you're thinking about a whole bigger group of animals that can have feathers, but it's just that we only have one small chunk of it that's still around today. And we got used to thinking that's what has feathers. And so I think that's a big contributor in this whole discussion as well.
You've just heard a clip from the Let's Talk Creation podcast. If you want to check out full episodes, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And if you want to check out other streaming options, visit us at coresci.org/podcast. That's coresci.org/podcast.